Back in 1939, when I started here at the Grand Ole Opry, the first song I sung was called the Mule Skinner Blues.
In 50 years as a star of the Grand Ole Opry, Bill Monroe has developed and defined a true American art form while pursuing a brilliant career. One that brought him legendary status as a performer, a place in the Country Music Hall of Fame, and that well-earned title, Father of Bluegrass Music.
Good morning, Captain. Good morning. Good morning, Shine. Do you need another mule skinner? Hat on your new button.
As a youngster in rural Kentucky, he had a passion for the music of his hill country homeland. And later, after he hit the road to perform, he immortalized one of his early inspirations in a now classic song, Uncle Pen.
People would come from far away, and it ain't so night till the break of day. When you come a little hotter, do-si-do, you knew Uncle Pen was ready to go. Lady, done about sundown, high the hill in the woods. Lady fiddle, Lord, how it rang, you'd have talk, you'd hear it sing.
As a songwriter, his works were recorded by every artist from Eddie Arnold to Elvis Presley. His very first hit was a 1930 original called The Kentucky Waltz.
We were waltzing that night in Kentucky beneath a beautiful harvest moon, and I was the boy that was
When the 50s rolled around, country music suffered a setback caused by rock and roll. But the father of bluegrass refused to compromise his style, and persistence paid off. In the 60s, the Bluegrass Boys found new, younger audiences at college festivals. Then, in 1966, Bill Monroe founded his own annual festival in Bean Blossom, Indiana. Nowadays, despite advancing years and a busy music schedule, he still works hard on his Middle Tennessee farm, pretty much like his family did back in Kentucky.
I've always had a lot of willpower, and I've never been lazy. And I like to work. I don't like to let any day get away from me. I don't do something. I like to do something every day.
Blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining.
He once called his style country music in overdrive. Whatever it is, it's made an indelible mark in American music history. No one knows that better than the many famous former sidemen who learned so much from the father of bluegrass.
Bill has always been my good friend and favorite entertainer. And I still think he's one of the greatest entertainers that ever been. And I really think a lot of Bill and hope him many, many more years.
One time Bill Monroe was down in, going down to California, and his bus broke down, so he couldn't get all of his band members to California, so he asked me to come down and play a show with him at San Diego State College.
Were you nervous?
Was I nervous? I'm always nervous when I play with Bill Monroe. I want to play his music right, you know what I mean?
Did you grow up, I guess you grew up listening to Bill Monroe?
Yes, sir. He's been my idol for years in bluegrass, and what was funny thing about it, you know, we got back, he wanted to know how much he owed me. I said, no, Bill, it was just my pleasure to be able to play with you. He says, well, I thought you was pretty smart. Now I think you're pretty stupid, he said.
I just thank him for all the wonderful experiences we've had together, the way he's conducted himself through the years, and made the bluegrass and old-time traditional music one of a kind, and feel like that I've been a better man having known you, Bill, and many, many more happy returns.
Well, I'm sure that there's not a person in country music that has not been moved or touched in some way by Bill Monroe. I especially am fond of him because he wrote a song that was one of my first big country records, which was Mule Skinner Blues. I did the song because it's my dad's favorite song. My dad is a huge Bill Monroe fan. And Porter Wagoner said, well, why don't you just do that song? And so he produced it. I mean, it was one of my better records, and I just love him because he's such an inspiration. He's the father of bluegrass music, and we're supposed to respect our fathers and our elders.
Right.
You're from the mountains of Tennessee and Bill Monroe's from the mountains of Kentucky. What is it about the mountains that inspires such great music?
Well, I think a lot of it is the Irish, English influence. People brought over those sad old mournful songs from the old country, and they were missing their homes, and there's just a dreadful sorrow that's kind of interwoven in it. And then I guess out of all that, Bill Monroe kind of put together a new sound, taking all those old sounds, the gospel and that old world influence, and made a whole new thing in bluegrass, and I love that sound.
Above the town, Uncle Ben played a fiddle on it, how it rang, you'd hear it talk, you'd hear it sing. Made an old piece called Soldier Joy, and one he called Boston Boy, the greatest of all what Jenny lent me, that's where feeling began. And even a bouncing down Hall Hill and above the town, Uncle Ben played a fiddle on it, how it rang, you'd hear it talk, you'd hear it sing.
Bill Monroe wrote this tribute to his Uncle Pen Vandiver decades before Ricky Skaggs was born, but it was Skaggs' 1984 version of the song that earned bluegrass music its first ever #1 record and brought Bill Monroe the recognition he deserved for creating a sound loved the world over.
I'll never forget that mournful day when Uncle Pen was called away. He hung up his fiddle and he hung up his bow and knew it was time for him to go.
I don't think he even realizes, he has no comprehension of how much of an influence he's been to American music. Buddy Holly was an absolute dyed-in-the-wool Bill Monroe fan. He loved bluegrass music so much, and he was such a fan of Monroe's. And you know, when I hear things like the Bluegrass Special and Honky Tonk Swing and songs like that, that's early acoustic rockabilly is exactly what that was. You know, I mean, Bill didn't have a, you know, he didn't have a drum in there, and he didn't have you know, electric guitar, but it had the rhythm and the push and the drive and the excitement and the energy that any rockabilly had, you know. So all of that influenced Hank Williams, which was a big key to rockabilly music, you know. So much of our music as we know it today really stems back to Bill Monroe.
What has Bill Monroe meant to your career, Ricky?
Bill Monroe, his music has probably been the foundation of my music. It's the rock solid granite foundation that my music is built on. And although I've varied in many different directions away from what I would say pure hardcore bluegrass of the way I was raised, the way I grew up, that kind of upbringing, that purity of the roots of that music has allowed me to be able to expand.
These two country boys took the sound that started in the hills of Kentucky to the mean streets of Manhattan. Skaggs considers working with Monroe on the Country Boy video one of the highlights of his life. Monroe proved he could show those city slickers a thing or two.
My favorite part in the whole video was when he was doing the dance in the, you know, on the subway. And those kids in New York, those break dancers, they loved him. Oh, they were trying to steal steps from him and everything like that, you know, and trying to pick up that Kentucky back step.
Skaggs' love and respect for Monroe extend into his personal life. Monroe is a grandfather figure to Skaggs' family. To the rest of us, he's the father of bluegrass, the patriarch of popular country music.
Well, very few people will ever have the calling in life that Bill Monroe's had in his life. I mean, he was a called man from I mean, I'm sure when he was in his mother's womb, he was a called man, you know, to create a form of music that would influence the world, and it has.
Janet is standing by live backstage with another artist whose work has been greatly inspired by Bill Monroe. Larry Cordell is a singer and songwriter who composed a musical tribute to the Opry star, which you'll hear later on stage. Right now, let's join Janet in the green room with one of our special guests, Larry Cordell.
That's right, Keith. Larry composed a tribute called
Kentucky King. We're going to hear it a little bit later on in the show tonight. But he's also done a lot of other writing for people like Ricky Skaggs. You wrote Highway 40 Blues, among others.
Yes, I did, Janet. I sure did. And I got some new things on the new album. I wrote a song called Heartbreak Hurricane with Jim Rushing. That'll be his next single. It'll be out November 14th. And I've got 4 other sides on the same album.
You stay awfully busy doing a lot of writing, but you do some picking too, don't you?
Yeah, we play every Wednesday night. We have a bluegrass band that plays out at the Bell Cove Club. Mr. Monroe comes in and plays with us on that a lot, and we have a great big time with it. And plus, I'm working on a band project for Capitol Records that we're in the process now of getting the deal signed to hopefully be artists as well as writers.
We just saw a piece just a second ago, an interview with Ricky about Bill Monroe, and you and Ricky Skaggs grew up together, basically in the same hometown. You two from the same hometown?
Yes. Ricky's mom and dad and my mom and dad still live about a half mile apart. We're from Cordle, Kentucky. It's not much of a place. There used to be a post office there. There's not anymore. Ricky tells everybody it fell in the creek, but it really didn't.
Well, it's a pretty big place. It produced you and Ricky Skaggs. That's pretty good.
Well, we're awful proud of it. We're sure not ashamed of it. And there was a lot of fine musicians from up in that part of the country. Keith Whitley was from just 18 miles away. He was from Sandy Hook, and we miss Keith a lot.
Well, growing up in that part of the country, I'll bet there was just no way to escape the influence of Bill Monroe and his music. Did you grow up with it?
Oh, yes. We didn't want to escape it, you know. I mean, my grandparents, my great-grandfather, Harry Bryant, was an old-time fiddle player. He taught me how to play, and they didn't even have a TV when I was a kid. And it was a big deal to watch the Opry or listen to the Opry on Saturday night. And he didn't care if you made a little bit of noise, but when Mr. Bill Monroe come on, he made everybody in the house be quiet, and we always had all of his records, and we always loved him. And of course, it shows, I think, in my music and Ricky's music and a lot of other people's music too. Buddy Holly and Elvis Presley, everybody in the world's been influenced by Bill.
Well, since you kind of grew up listening to him, you probably can't remember the first time you heard him, but do you remember the first time you saw him perform?
Yes, I do. It was at the Martha Schoolhouse in Martha, Kentucky, and I believe it was 1958 or 59, and Ricky played on that show with him. Ricky was a little boy, a little bitty boy, because I'm about 5 years older than Rick, so he probably was 5 years old. And he called him up on stage, and it was awesome for us. I mean, there he was bigger than life, and he was real close to where we lived, you know, and we were just spellbound. We couldn't even, you know, it was amazing.
Well, you and Jim Rushing do a lot of writing together, right? And Jim is another man who has been greatly influenced by Bill Monroe and a giant in the bluegrass music.
Yes, Jim's one brought the idea to me, the Kentucky King idea to me. He told me about a year before we did it that he had an idea to write a song called the Kentucky King, and it didn't really register on me. And then last winter he told me again, and he said, you know, it's going to be about Bill Monroe, and I want you to help me because you're from up in Kentucky. And boy, thank God that he asked me to do it, you know, because and I didn't think about it being Bill's 50th anniversary at the time, you know, and then it dawned on me, working with him out at the Bell Cove and stuff, you know, that's another big thrill. I mean, the first time I got to sing and play with him, you know, when you're a kid, you just don't think you'll ever get to do that.
Yeah. Well, just in case we've got folks who might be coming to Nashville sometime soon, they've been hearing you talk about Bell Cove, and this is a club out in Hendersonville, in that area of Nashville. And so on Wednesday nights, you sit in with Bill Monroe and his boys.
Bill usually comes, really, and sometimes some of his band comes. It's usually me and the Henson brothers, Derwin and Danny, and Kenny Lewis and Glenn Duncan. And then there's just all kinds of bluegrass players that come. They just all come, and Mr. Monroe gets up and sits in, and Wayne Lewis, and we have a great time. It's Joy Ford owns a club, and it's real beautiful. It's right on the lake, and we really have fun with it.
Well, it does. It sounds like a good time. I may have to come out some Wednesday night and check it out. You've got a record deal on Capitol, and you're going to be putting together, or have put together, a band, so we're looking forward for that to come about for you?
Yeah, well, we're working real hard on that right now, so we appreciate all the support we've had.
Well, thanks for being with us tonight, Larry. I know it's a special night for you to be here to perform and to honor Bill Monroe. Thanks for being with us.
It certainly is, and I want to say hello to my mother and daddy, Charles and Christine Cordle, up in Cordell, Kentucky.
Right.
Hi, Mom and Dad.
Okay, Cordell, Kentucky. In just a few minutes, we're going to be back right after this break, and Keith is going to talk to the man that all of this is about tonight, the father of bluegrass, Mr. Bill Monroe, right after this.
And now, without further ado, the man of the hour himself, Mr. Bluegrass, Bill Monroe. Mr. Monroe, it's good to see you.
I'm glad to be here with you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
50 years at the Grand Ole Opry.
That's a long time, you know.
That's a long time for anything, you know.
But I like to work, you know, work hard, and they've treated me so good here at the Grand Ole Opry and WSM, and that's the bluegrass fans can hear me here, you see, and learn a lot about bluegrass music.
And so, I know there's pickers out there tonight sitting on every word,
yes,
every note.
Right.
Like Ricky Skaggs did when he was growing up, like Emmylou Harris did, and so many before them. That must make you feel good to see the young artists come along, and, well, some of the tape we've seen tonight with Dolly, Parton, and different people telling how you inspired them.
Well, it does make me feel good, and to get to see Dolly Parton's picture, you know, that's really something.
Makes you feel good, too,
yes,
huh?
Sir.
Even after 50 years at the Grand Ole Opry.
Yes,
Let's go back to that night, October 28th, 1939. Tell me what was going through your mind. I know you did Mule Skinner Blues that night, but just tell me about that first appearance.
Well, sir, when I come up to the Grand Ole Opry on a Monday, and I met Harry Stone, David Stone, and the solemn old judge all going out to get coffee. And I told them I wanted to have an audition. They said, well, you're supposed to be here on Wednesday, but said, we'll be right back and listen to you. So they come back, and I run over about 3 or 4 songs. And they said, well, you can go to work this Saturday night, and if you ever leave here, you'll have to fire yourself.
Is that right? Hired you on the spot.
So I've stayed here all the way.
Now, who were the Bluegrass boys at that point?
Cleo Davis was the first man I ever hired for bluegrass. He was from the state of Alabama. Fiddler Art Wooten was from North Carolina. He was my first fiddle player. And Amos Gearin was from South Carolina. He played the bass.
We've seen some of the former bluegrass boys on tape tonight. Folks like Mac Wiseman.
Yes, sir.
Of course, Earl Scruggs, Lester Flatt were both bluegrass boys. I think Ralph, well, not Ralph, but Carter Stanley worked for you for a while, the Stanley brothers.
Carter worked a pretty good while. Ralph worked one day as a bluegrass boy.
Yeah.
Yes,
String Bean.
Yes, sir. String
Doug
Bean.
Dillard.
String Bean was my first banjo player.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
The list just goes on of the folks who've come through the ranks and then gone on and done well for themselves.
Yes, sir.
Is there a rule about a bluegrass boy, how he must conduct himself after he becomes a star, too?
Well, when he works for me, you know, I bring his name out and tell the folks about him here on the Grand Ole Opry that we're going to sing this number and he's going to sing the lead, or if he's going to play the fiddle or the banjo. So it's a big help to them. So if they work about 1.5 years, or I say 3 years, they've built a good name for this. So it's kind of like a school of music, but they've done a lot to help me here in the way of bluegrass music.
Didn't those boys ever give you any trouble, Bill?
No, sir, never have.
You kept them straight, huh?
Kept them straight.
I remember Sonny Osborne told me one time when he went to work for you, he was about 13, 14 years old?
13 years old.
Yeah, said he was scared to death of you.
He was awful big, though, for 13, though.
Did you, obviously, he didn't give you any trouble because he's scared of you.
No, he didn't give me a bit of trouble.
Matter of fact, I think he's still scared of you to this day.
Well, we get along good.
I like to hear him do his imitation of you. Do you hear all these people doing imitations of you?
Every once in a while I do.
How do you feel about that?
Well, they all speak well of me, and I appreciate that.
They all love you.
Yes.
I know that for a fact. I hear Ricky Skaggs do his Bill Monroe imitation, and it comes strictly from love. I can tell you that right now.
Rick is a good friend of mine.
Yeah. I remember one time when he came out with an album, had Walking in Jerusalem Just Like John on it, and it was kind of a rocked up version of it, just a little bit. I came around and asked him, I said, what do you think of Ricky's version of Walking Through Jerusalem Just Like John? You looked at me and said, anything Ricky Skaggs does is all right with me. That ought to tell you about what kind of friends y'all are.
Right.
What are you going to do for us on stage tonight?
Let's see. The first song I ever sung on the Grand Ole Opry was the Mule Skinner Blues. And it got 3 encores that time I sung it. So that's going to be the first number, I think, that I sang tonight. And then I will do Blue Moon of Kentucky.
That's one Emmylou is going to do with you?
Yes, sir. Kentucky Walls and My Rose of Old Kentucky.
Yeah. You still get out and work on the farm? Like we saw some pictures of you there riding a horse and fooling with the chickens.
Yeah, I work some on the farm. I've slowed down a whole lot, but I love the farm. I was raised on the farm, and I know how to drive mules and horses, you know, and gear them up and put them to the wagon or put them to the plow or pull logs or anything like that. I was raised up to do that, and so I've always loved it, and I like to be on the farm where I can hear. And I'd always run my fox hounds on Tuesday night. I've got 5, and they can really drive that fox hard.
Yeah. Well, I bet a long time ago when you and Birch and Charlie were just starting out, never dreamed it'd last 50 years in the Grand Ole Opry, did you?
No, sir, no, sir.
Well, we're awfully glad it has.
Well, I am too.
We got a lot of folks here. Let's give a big hand to Mr. Bill Monroe.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Bill, we love you very much.
Love you.
Here's to 50 more.
Thank you so much.
Just a few minutes, Emmylou Harris joins the father of Bluegrass on stage. It promises to be a memorable night at the Grand Ole Opry, so stay tuned. By the way, my backstage buddy Joe Elmore is up in Bill Monroe's home state of Kentucky tonight. Joe's emceeing the 2nd annual homecoming show for Opry star Patty Loveless. And next week, we'll share highlights. What a great show we've got for you tonight. Bill Monroe's 50th anniversary at the Grand Ole Opry. And what a show it's going to be. We've got some surprises in store that I don't think even Mr. Monroe knows about. But he'll be on stage along with the Bluegrass Boys. Emmylou Harris is our special guest. She's a big Bill Monroe fan, and I think she and Mr. Monroe are going to make a little musical history with some duets tonight. Larry Cordell has a great tribute he's written to Bill Monroe. Of course, Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys coming up right here on the Nashville Network. Stay with us. It's a very special night at the Grand Ole Opry. It's Bill Monroe's 50th anniversary as a Grand Ole Opry member, and what a show we have lined up for you tonight. A lot of surprises in store, but I can tell you, of course, that Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys will be on stage to entertain you. Our special guest tonight paying tribute to Mr. Monroe, Emmylou Harris, and a fellow by the name of Larry Cordell, who's written a very special song about his idol, Bill Monroe. So the big red